Stephen House from Full-Time Devils. This is the preview for Rostov in the Europa League. I'm delighted to be joined by Statman Daddy, Rachel and Joshy. How is everybody doing?
Good.
Well, thanks for that. Thanks for turning up and getting involved. Right, so we are looking at Europa League being one of the very real possibilities for us getting Champions League football next season. I'm going to come at you first, Rachel. Are we worried about not getting into the top four in the Premier League?
I don't think we're worried about that at all. Like, we're only 3 points off fourth place at the moment with a game in hand, and we also have to play. We have to play Arsenal, Tottenham, and Man City yet. So I feel like there are big games that can make a big difference for us so far. But I do feel like that doesn't mean that the Europa League might not. We have to consider that the Europa League might be the best way to get into the Champions League next year. Like, the games that we'll be playing, yeah, there are a lot of them, and it's always harder in knockout competition to know if you can win it, but they're easier games for us than the Premier League, as we saw with Bournemouth this weekend.
Josh, are we going to miss out, do you think? A lot of people say this is the best chance, like Rachel just said, but mathematically it's not the best chance, is it? There's a lot more margin for error in the Premier League.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got, like, as Rachel pointed out, we're only 3 points off fourth with a game in hand, and we're only 1 point behind Arsenal. So the main worry isn't necessarily to start panicking about not making top four right now. It's the fact that whenever we've been presented with a chance to really sort of move up the table, we've put in a performance like we did against Bournemouth, and sort of something that aligns with that is when Zlatan isn't firing, we can't seem to adapt, and people don't seem to step up. And I would say that's the main worry if you're going to talk about worries. But I think it's still way too early to be talking about, oh, we're never going to make not going to make the top four. So, you know, from that perspective, it's still there. Mathematically, we're still there. We're still on a good run. But obviously, the Europa League represents a great sort of way to get into the Champions League, but more importantly, it's a trophy that we've not won before. So, you know, I would prefer to win the Europa League than to finish fourth. Obviously, both is the best way to do it because you'd guarantee it with your league finish, and then you've got your Europa League final to look forward to. But and again, as Rachel pointed out, knockout competitions are a lot more difficult to sort of plan for because you don't know who you're going to get. You know, there are one-off or two-leg ties, so it can be difficult to mitigate for poor performances like we had against Bournemouth. But it's way too early to start panicking about top four, and we're still sort of there are issues that need to be sorted out, but there's still a lot of scope for making that top four.
Dave, people are talking a lot about prioritising one competition over another. I don't personally believe you can prioritise unless you completely switch out the squad and play an under-23 squad. Otherwise, the first team's still involved, the tactics and everything, the coaching staff are all still involved. Where do you stand? Prioritise one or the other, or do you think take every game as it comes?
I'd prioritise the Europa League 100% of the time. I think, you know, it's a competition, like Josh is saying, that we've never won. It's got a lot of good positives about that. You look at who's left in the Europa League as well, and you're thinking Roma, Lyon, probably the two teams that could cause a problem. They're playing each other. This is something that we need to start taking real notice of, and I think Mourinho's done that. His selection in the previous tie against Saint-Etienne showed that, and in the league, the problem is we keep messing up against these weaker sides, whether it is Zlatan. You know, you look further than Zlatan. You could also argue that the two centre-halves that played against Bournemouth at the weekend weren't very good. They both made two big errors. Without those two big errors, United don't concede any chances that are any good. You know, Bournemouth have one shot on goal if Phil Jones doesn't dive in and if Rojo gets done with a simple ball over the top. So maybe it's an evaluation of those two centre-halves, and do we need to sign some centre-backs in the summer that actually have quality? Eric Bailly is a good player, and he will be a very, very good player. But the other three, they're all a bit hot and cold, and can you have that consistency to get into the top four? I'd argue not. But then the thing that we've got, the flip side of that, is that Arsenal, Liverpool, Spurs, none of them look like they want to be in the top four. They're same as United, where they just fluff up when they shouldn't fluff up, and they win when they shouldn't win. And it's a weird one.
Right, you just said you would prioritise Europa League. How? Tell me how you prioritise it. Are you going to rest players for Premier League games?
I think, yeah. Well, in the latter stages, you know, I think Rostov, we've got Chelsea in the FA Cup. Obviously, I'd love to win the FA Cup again, but we've won the League Cup already. I'd say that the Europa League is more important than the FA Cup right now. So I'll play my strongest 11 against Rostov, and then not potentially rest players, but rotate the squad. I think that's the thing United have got. They've got quite a lot of players in those attacking slots, quite a lot of defenders. You know, you think we've got four centre-backs. I mentioned they're not up to the right standards that they should be at Manchester United. They're still decent players. So there's rotation there, but I definitely prioritise the Europa League over the FA Cup.
I'm going to throw
week.
a hypothetical at you, right? Okay, so you play your strongest 11, and then you go to Chelsea with not your strongest 11. We went there with our strongest 11 earlier in the season, and they tated us, right? They was far and away the better side. They put 4 goals past us. Let's say they replicate that. They put 4 goals past us throughout the FA Cup. Then you're resting, rotating for Premier League games. We end up coming 7th or 8th, which is possible. And we lose in the semi-final or the final just because that's football, of the Europa League. Then what? People will go absolutely mental, Dave.
The thing you just said that's football. I've just told you that the Europa League has probably 2 teams that could test us out. Roma, who got beat by Napoli this weekend, competing for that
doesn't mean that we wouldn't cock it up against Rostov, though. Rostov could put us out.
But the question is, going back to what you mentioned about, we could finish 8th, we could finish 7th. There's all hypothetical.
That's why I said I'm going to throw a hypothetical at you.
Mourinho has prioritised.
So I'm just asking you.
And throw it back
I'm asking you to validate your point, Dave, because you're saying you want to prioritise one competition. You didn't validate it. You want to prioritise one competition, but if you then don't win that competition, which is a very, very real possibility, and you've thrown away, and we end up coming 8th in the league, can you honestly see the United fan base or the press going easy on that? Because I can't.
Obviously, the press won't go easy on that, but you're saying in a situation it's hypothetically coming 8th. Maybe if you throw all your eggs into the Premier League basket, United come 5th and they miss out of the Champions League spot anyway. And that is the big thing. If United want to attract the calibre of players they're linked with, the likes of Antoine Griezmann, the likes of a decent centre-half, ain't going to come to a team that's not playing Champions League football. So I think that is a big, big thing. Champions League football, and the easiest way to get that is through the Europa League.
Is it the easiest way to get that, though?
I'd say so.
We're 3-1 to come into the top 4,
Arsenal,
but we're 7-1 to win the Europa League. So the bookies don't agree with you.
Well, the bookies are wrong, mate.
Odds aren't always based on actual probability as well. They're sometimes based on the bets that are put on by big punters. So it's not always the best option.
They are, but I'm going on the probabilities here. So the probabilities is twice as good for us to get into the top 4 via the Premier League, in the Premier League, rather than winning a knockout cup competition. The next thing we've got to talk about then is Paul Pogba. I'm going to stick with you here, Statman Daddy. I'm going to say Paul Pogba. There's a lot of fans who I think have overreacted and said the guy needs to be dropped. Is he in poor form? Are you happy with his contribution in the team at the moment?
I think it's mixed. He's had some really good games, had some quite poor games. I think the thing that Paul Pogba needs to do in playing these weaker teams is evaluate how he's using the ball in terms of the tempo, in terms of the pass selection. We saw against Bournemouth in the last 20 minutes. He kept on going long, and it was wrong. You need to move a team that's got 10 men from side to side, pass it to one side, move it to the side, and create those overloads in the middle by stretching the opponent. Paul Pogba didn't do that. The crazy one was like 84th minute when he was trying to find direct passes into Marouane Fellaini's feet. What are you doing, Paul? But apart from that, you look at the basic stats, and he's outperforming the majority of central midfielders in the Premier League in terms of forward passes in the opposition's half, ranked number 1. In terms of chance creation, in terms of central midfield, only behind David Silva and Kevin De Bruyne. Those 2 players have played in the front 3 positions behind a striker, not in central midfield. So Paul Pogba's playing well this season, but it's the consistency and his decision-making that he needs to improve. But it's been a good season for him.
I would agree on the decision-making. Joshie, what do you make of it? Do you think he's in good form at the moment? Do you think he's in poor form at the moment? What do you reckon?
Well, I mean, looking at the Bournemouth game, first half we were pretty much excellent, just didn't put away our chances. And the main thing to look at from Pogba's performance against Bournemouth is when they went down to 10 men. And as Dave correctly pointed out, his use of the ball when he was in possession was really poor. The direct long balls forward, but also I think when he did try and move it around, he spent too long on the ball, allowing Bournemouth to sort of regroup. And we've done it really well in the past at United, where we've switched play from one side to the other, stretched teams. And when you've got Rashford on one side, Martial on the other, that's what you need to be doing. I thought Fellaini coming on was a bit weird, because I think Carrick would have been really good in that type of role. The other thing about Pogba is, I think he's generally had a good season, and people need to realise he's quite young, and is in a pivotal role in the side. Central midfield is a really difficult place to have the type of impact, a spectacular impact. But I think he's been really very good most of the time. Where he needs to improve is in situations like this, where we don't necessarily need him to try and make that insane input, that amazing through ball. We need him to be calm and dictate play a bit more, because Bournemouth was sitting back. There was no need for sort of all action box to box type play. We needed to sit on the ball, direct play, and he just didn't do that, and that's where he needs to improve. But he's young; he's not going to have everything in his locker right now. And yeah, it was a poor performance against Bournemouth, but loads of players play poorly against Bournemouth. I can't really think of anyone that really stood out in terms of good performances. So I would chalk that one performance up as part of his learning curve. I'm not going to be overly critical. Obviously, you want him to do better. He's phenomenally talented, but you can't expect everything to click in every single game. And Bournemouth again is just one of those ones where he was a bit off the boil, as were a lot of other players.
I'm going to say back on that, I actually thought he was great in the first half, but I thought in the second half, when we really needed him to produce a final ball or something like that, it wasn't just not there. It was almost childlike, some of the mistakes that was being made from him. Rachel, where do you stand?
Yeah,
sorry, go on, Joshy.
I was going to say, when you're playing against a team like that, when they're set up, where with down to 10 men and they're setting up to just defend, as they obviously were going to, that whole idea of just trying to find that final ball every time, that is not the way you work it. You've got to be patient and, spread the play a bit, move them around, stretch them, bring the defenders out, bring their midfielders out away and create space. And you can't always just do that with one single final ball. And that's where he was going wrong. In the past, he's put in balls over the top for Zlatan, for other players, and they've been superb. But we just didn't have that space because they were sitting back. There's no space in behind. So you've got to move them out of position. And that's where he went wrong. And also you need to do it the pace of play needs to be a bit quicker. It was coming to him. He'd look up, look around, and then they've regrouped. So you're not really able to stretch that either. So yeah, he's great at finding that final ball when there's space. But it's in these situations where it needs a bit more of a calm head and understanding how the team works together to then break down the opposition.
He did seem to get stuck in that loop of just trying the same ball over and over again over the top. Rachel, where do you stand? Are you thinking he's in good form? Are you think it's a bit of an overreaction to what was a poor result in the end? And if you look at it over the course of a season, if Zlatan had put away just a couple more of the chances Pogba's created for him, and he has created so many, we'd be in a title fight right now. And would the perception of Paul Pogba be totally different then?
For me, the issue around Paul Pogba is that because the rhetoric around him is always about his price tag. He was the most expensive football player in the world, and because of that, it skews the conversation. You forget, like Joshi said, he's young. It'll take time for him to settle in the Premier League to figure out what the right decisions are. And a few weeks ago, I really thought he was settled. He was sorting out. He wasn't shooting 5 times a game from outside of the box and trying to get the flare shots on. He was doing everything right. And I feel like that's what was happening at the start of Bournemouth. And in the second half, the pressure got to him again, just like I feel like it did at the start of the season with his price tag. Everybody's looking at him. He's the most expensive player in the world. He should be able to change a game on a sixpence, and he couldn't do it in the end. But I feel like he is playing well, and I feel like next year he'll be playing better. And I feel like he is worth his price tag, but it's too much of the conversation right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think the price tag thing is just something that you see opposition in the media bringing up constantly. I don't think it affects him when he's on the pitch, but I do think it is at the back of his mind that he probably needs to justify it somehow, and he justifies it with his ordinary performances. I don't think he needs to be adding the flashy stuff. Anyway, let's go to a quick break. So let's have a look at everybody's starting 11 then. Josh, I'm going to come to you first. Who do you think is going to be lining up against Rostov? But before we get straight into that, I'm just going to read you out this absolute ludicrous league table that's going on here. John Shin is top of the league with 55. I don't recognise this league table. This is nonsense. Statman Davies is on 57. Makola is on 52. I'm on 46. After having an unfair deduction, I don't recognise the authority of this board, so I'm top of the league, I think. Paul from Rankcast is on 37, Andy takes 25. Mo, who should be back after being banned for dabbing some point this week, he's on 14. Ben's on 14. Rachel, you're on 13. And Joshi, after being in every single one, you're on 10 points. Are you going to just pick Dave in net, mate, and you'll get more points? And then Greg Johnson pulling the rear up with 4. How do you get a 4? I don't even know how you get a 4. Anyway, Joshy, give us the wrong starting 11 for this week.
The wrong starting 11. I think we're going to go with a really strong starting 11 as Jose can put out. I don't think Mkhitaryan is back. I think Jose said he'll be back for the Chelsea game. So aside from that, I think we'll go with De Gea in goal, Valencia at right back, Bailly, and I'm going to go Jones in the centre. Had a bit of difficulty with the left side. Don't know whether he's going to bring Shaw in with 2 games in a row, but he did play well. But with that in mind, I'll put Rojo at left back. Then Carrick, Pogba, Herrera in the middle, and then Mata, Zlatan, and Martial up top.
Interesting. Rachel,
Strong.
what are you going with for your 11?
I'm going quite similar because I do think we're going to go strong, which is slightly frustrating because I feel like Chelsea on Monday could have been such a good game for us. We can go back to Stamford Bridge. We've been doing so well since that game. We could have actually shown how far we've come. But I don't think that's going to happen because Jose makes the right decisions. He doesn't need to prove something. We should focus on the Europa League. So I think it's going to be De Gea in net, Valencia. I'm going to slightly change it up. I feel like might be Bailly and Rojo as our centre-back pairing with Blind at left-back, or that's what I want to see. And then Carrick, Herrera, Pogba in midfield. And then I agree, I think it'll be Mata, Ibrahimovic and Martial up top.
David, start 11, please.
I'm going to go with a 4-2-3-1. I think Mourinho's going to go for the gung-ho approach that we've sort of seen in the Europa League, a bit more attacking, a bit more pressing from the front. David De Gea in goal, Valencia, Bailly, Smalling, Shaw. I thought Shaw was absolutely fantastic against Bournemouth. Again, it was a questionable substitution from Mourinho, taking off Shaw, who'd had a really good game, left-footed, can get crosses into the box, and bringing on Jess Lingard, a right-footed attacking midfielder, to go left-back who can't even take a throw-in. So Shaw, in terms of the stats, won more tackles than any other player on the pitch. In fact, won 5 out of 5 of his tackles attempted. And that cruncher on Smith was brilliant. Absolutely destroyed the fella. Into central midfield, Herrera, Pogba. I want to see those two partnering each other. United massively missed Ander Herrera against Bournemouth. They missed his intensity without the ball, and they also missed his intensity with the ball. We've seen him pop up with a number of assists, balls from the sort of just inside right channel to Zlatan previously in the Premier League. We could have done again one of those against Bournemouth. Into the band of 3, I think Mkhitaryan will be fit. I think Mourinho will hopefully throw him in there with Mata and Anthony Martial and Zlatan through the middle. I think it's going to go be strong. United with a strong team and hopefully score a few goals against Rostov.
Yeah, I think if Mkhitaryan is fit, he comes in. But
yeah, definitely.
I just wasn't 100% sure whether or not he was. So
it's a balancing act, isn't it? Because obviously 2 massive games with Rostov and with Chelsea, and it is difficult to know. I think there's a very real chance Jose plays whatever he feels his strongest 11 is in both of those games with very little rotation whatsoever. I think you might have a bit of forced rotation on us because if Zlatan does end up getting this ban, I think that might be forced upon us. Apart from that, I think he'd probably just go with the same 11 and deal with the consequences at a later date. So what do we know about Rostov? Dave, I'm going to come to you, being our resident nerd. Please tell us something about Rostov. But before we do talk about that, the Russian minister, one of the Russian ministers, is on the board of the Russian Football Union, right? This is terrifying considering they're hosting a World Cup next year. And he's tried to draw up rules for fighting at football. They're not saying let's just ignore the problem with hooliganism. He's actively trying to get written down, here's how you do it rules. This is terrifying for United fans going, we've seen problems in Eastern Europe already. We've seen what happened at the Euros with the gangs of Russian hooligans. The fact that a World Cup is going there is mental. But aside from that, what do you know about Rostov?
Well, that is pretty scary. Rostov, so they beat Bayern Munich 3-2 in the Champions League. They played very well that game. They played a sort of 5 at the back, 3 in midfield, and 2 up top. And they just soaked it up. You look at the stats of the forwards, and they were making clearances in their penalty area. Players you potentially look out for, Cesar Navas has been at Rostov for probably about 5 years now. He's big centre-half. So if we're going long and we decide to chuck the boot at it, Paul Pogba's playing those long balls, that's probably the wrong approach. You want to get down the side of him, big defender, getting someone like Marcus Rashford, Anthony Martial to run at him could be quite good. In terms of players that have been linked with Premier League clubs, Asmoud has been linked with Liverpool, sort of an attacking midfielder that is playing up front in this 5-3-2 formation. Technically half decent and scored a few goals for Rostov, who did in fact win the Russian Premier League last season, so he's potentially someone to look at. And also Poloz scored a few goals in the Champions League and the Europa League this season as well, another striker, 25 years old, Russian. So there's a few players to look out for, but I think overall it's tactically they sit back and try to soak up pressure and then attack here where you're weak down the full-back side. So should be a win for Manchester United.
Really? We don't have a great record in Russia. I believe we've won 1 in 9, have we, or something like that?
Something like that, but I think it's a team that United could tear apart in a way. But if they have beaten Bayern Munich, they gave Atletico Madrid a really good game, so could expect goals away in Russia.
Interesting. Do I need to come to Joshua or Rachel for this? Have you got anything to add about Rostov?
Yeah.
Go on then, Joshua.
I've done a little bit of reading, you know. No, I mean, look,
What's the average
I
rainfall?
don't know that there'll be range. I don't know.
I actually just checked the weather to see how cold it was. It's just average. It's like the weather here. It's boring.
Go on then, Joshua. Give us your fountain of knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, look, Dave's mentioned that they play five at the back, and I think one of the things that they do is they keep their fullbacks quite deep. They're not sort of wing backs. They keep them quite deep. So it's going to be they're probably going to be quite difficult to break down. Yeah. And especially at home, they've been pretty decent. They've won, or rather, they've only lost once in their last 7 in Europe, and that was against Atletico Madrid. And Dave mentioned they beat Bayern Munich at home as well. And in their sort of progress in Europe this season, they've beaten teams with decent pedigree. I mean, to qualify for the Champions League, I think they went in the first round. It was Anderlecht. Second round, it was Ajax. In their group games, they had Bayern Munich, Atletico, and PSV Eindhoven. So they finished above PSV in that game. And they just battered Sparta Prague in the Europa League. So they've got decent pedigree. They're not complete sort of walkovers that we're just going to walk through them. And tactically, they are a team that are quite sort of solid defensively. That being said, they just hammered someone 6-0 at the weekend, so they've obviously got some bit of a spark going forward as well. And Dave highlighted the 2 players that seem to be getting their goals. I think between them, 20 goals this season, which isn't a huge amount, but those are their 2 top goal scorers. So, you know, we have to be wary. We don't want to go there and think we're going to push them over. But I think they're definitely not. We should be beating them, but it's not going to be an easy one.
Rachel, what do you know about Rostov?
Tactically, I just learned everything about Rostov in the last 5 minutes. But beyond that, I do know it is in Russia. It's 2,000 miles away. It's a 3-hour time difference. And the reason I say that is I feel a lot more expecting your players to be able to play a game on a Thursday and a game on a Monday is completely understandable, except that this travel that they're going to have to do, this difference in times, like I'd be a lot more sure about this game if it was at home. But it's not at home, it's away, and I think that's a worry.
All right, before we come to the score predictions, I'm just going to tell you a little bit that I know about Russia and Rostov in general. And you thought we was going to go for a whole preview without mentioning food. Are you mental? Right, so in Western Russia, where Rostov is, there's a little bit of a penchant for porridge with meat in it. Sounds like my kind of gaff. Anyway, give us your score predictions. Rachel.
When Stephen mentioned that, he used the word awesome. And I feel like all the rest of us can agree awful. That's is right. What you would
meat,
say.
Good. Porridge, good. Jelly, good. What's the matter with you?
You're saying things and it's making me feel sick. So let's move on. And I'm going to go with a standard 2-0 win.
2-0 win to United? Away from home?
Yeah, confidence.
In Mother Russia?
Confidence.
Joshy, what do you reckon?
I think it will be a hard-fought 2-0 win.
I was going to say 4.
Oh my God, what's the matter with you lot? Dave, give us your nonsense prediction.
My nonsense is going to be 4-3 United.
You're all absolutely mental. It's going to be 0-0 to death. And then we're going to go and eat porridge and meat. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us. Get your predictions in the comments below. Get your starting 11 in the comments below. And also the big topic that we're talking about is, are we going to rotate and how do we rotate? How do you split up, like Rachel said, the time zone differences, and how you're going to cope with 2 games like this in 1 week? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Give us a big fat like and subscribe if you don't already. And we'll see you later. Meat.